So in today's video, we're going to talk about the findArray method. So the findArray method is actually very self-explanatory. Basically what it does is going to find an element inside an array based on a certain condition, right? So here I have an example. I have an array, right, of 4 numbers, and I'm just printing it on the screen. So if I run this by not doing anything else, I get just the array, right? So if we try to use the find method, we just have to say array.find, and this guy takes in first is the callback function. So the callback function, what it is a function that gets the element it's iterating, and it gets called for every single element in the array, right? So here we have function, and the first parameter is actually our element. So lm would be either 16 minus 102 and all of those elements, one after the other. So what we have to return here is whether or not our element matches our condition. So let's say we want to find the first element that is less than 0. Well, to do this, what we have to do is just say return lm less than 0. What I would do is say, okay, find would go like this. It's going to call this function with lm being equal to 16. It's going to ask, is lm less than 0? Is 16 less than 0? Well, not. No, it's not. So it's going to go forward. It's going to ask minus 100. Is minus 100 less than 0? Well, yes, actually it is. And that's going to automatically return as the result. So this is what the find function returns. So you're going to have to take in the result. So I'm going to just call it res here, and also console log it on the screen so we can see it. If I try to run this now, you'll notice I get minus 100 because that's the first element that is less than 0, right? So keep this in mind. Find always takes in the first, or returns the first element that matches the condition. An interesting feature to this callback function is that it can take not only just one parameter, it actually has 3 parameters which it is called with. The second one is the index of our number. So for example, 16 would have the index 0 and 2 would have the index 2 because that's the third element in the array. And a third parameter onto this callback function is the actual array that we're iterating over. So if your function is somewhere else explicitly defined and you're just going to reference it here, not create another anonymous function, then it can be useful to actually add in the third parameter that is our array. So we're going to call this inner array so that we don't call this the same as our outer array. Right. Now you can actually check. So you can actually base your condition on these parameters. You can say, okay, return if index is, for example, 2, right? It will work if we try to run this, right? We get 2, which is the element at index 2, right? So that's 0, that's 1, that's 2. Makes sense. But usually wouldn't do that because you could just simply say array of 2, right? That would be the exact same thing. So don't really use find in this way. Besides actually passing in the array using our third parameter to the callback function, you can actually add it as the this parameter. So you can say, for example, let's console log this.length, right? But right now this is not what we want. It's not our array. So you can actually set the this value whenever you're calling find. So as the second parameter of the find call. So what's the second parameter of the find call? Well, the first one is, well, the function itself, right? So this is the first one. So right after the first one, we say comma, and then we pass in the second parameter, which is, as you can see, this arg. That's what it's called. And this can be really anything. I'm just going to pass in our array just to, well, prove a point here. So if I try to console log here the length, we should get 4s actually, I think 3 times on the screen. And we do. So we get every single time it's iterating over an element, we get the length printed on the screen. So it makes sense. Now, an optimization that I like doing whenever I'm using these type of array methods is actually, instead of using a function, use an arrow function, right? So instead of using this anonymous function, we're going to use the arrow notation. Why? That's because of three things. One, usually you only deal with one parameter. Here I added these two, but these are rarely used, right? So we only have our element. Secondly, we usually have just one single statement, right? Here I just proved a point using the console log, but we don't really need that. So that's just one statement. And thirdly, we actually return the result of that one statement. So because of those three conditions being met, it's actually very useful to use the arrow function in this case. So to do this, we just simply remove function. We also remove these two parameters, since we don't really need them anymore. Since we only have now one parameter, we can actually remove the parentheses and add an arrow here, and then remove the brackets and the return keyword, just like so, and there you go. We can also remove the array, since inside an arrow function you don't have a this keyword, so that doesn't work. So there we go. And also actually triple equals strict equal here is probably better, right? And we want our element to actually be, let's say, less than 0 as we had it before. Now if we try to run this, you'll notice we get the same result as our initial run, right? We get the first element that is less than 0, which is minus 100. So it makes sense. If I try to add here, for example, minus 65, if I run this, you'll notice I still get minus 100. If I, for example, add minus 65 here, it should actually give us minus 65. So that works very, very nice. Now, before you go, I want to also cover another array method that is very similar to this one, and that's called findIndex. And guess what findIndex does? It simply returns the index of the element to which this condition returns true, right? So in our case, if we run this, take a moment to think about what we should get as a result. Okay, so if you figure it out, the result actually should be, as you can see, 1. Why? That's because the first element that meets this condition is actually the second element in the array, which has the index 1, right? So this is a really, I think sometimes it's actually very useful to use the findIndex function instead of the index of function, which we may talk in another video about, but I'm sure you have used it before. And it functions the same way. It can take 3 parameters for the callback function. It can also modify this argument and so on. So I hope this video was useful to you. If you have any questions, please do leave them down in the comments below, or if you have any other suggestions related to any of the array methods or just JavaScript in general, or even C, why not? Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Take care.